Welcome back to Executive Summit. My name is Chris Caputo. I am your host, and today I'm joined by Danny Clinkscale. Hi, Danny.
Hello, Chris. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, bud. And Danny is one of Kansas City's most notable and long-standing broadcast voices, MC and speaker. He's highly praised. He's a highly praised presenter and interviewer. He's experienced and revered in a variety of platforms. Danny can inspire an audience, whether it be a book, a presentation, presenting on sports or recovery, as MC for charitable fundraisers or golf tournaments, awards ceremonies, and much more. Also, Danny is an outstanding resource as a corporate interviewer for podcasts and videos. As a far more effective way to get a business message across than a static presentation. His disarming yet probing style puts the presenter in an effective and impressive light. So I've got my work cut out for me today. I am interviewing a master of broadcast. And so you do also for the Chiefs and the Royals, you do pre and post game as well. Right. Still some commentary today on that. So
yes, I still actually do contract work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, where I worked for 18 years full time through May, and 18 years, pretty darn good run in radio.
Yeah.
My dad was a broadcaster, and he had about 15 different jobs in his career. So
okay.
I've only had about 5, so that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
So this is, I'm morphing into a different area, but I still do Chiefs post game for 810 and also college football game day. So that provides a good platform for promoting my website, which is just launched on November 1st. And it also is something I enjoy doing still. And and with the Chiefs playing so great, it gives you a good audience. And
no question.
You get less crazy people because they win almost every game. So people are in a better mood. But the dirty little secret about post-game shows is that they actually are usually better when the team loses.
Oh, really?
Because people are worked up.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Unless
Excellent.
they just lose and lose and lose.
Right.
Like the Royals did for so many years.
Right.
And I did Royals post-game shows from 1996 and till they started winning. So all the thousands and thousands of games. Now that's not good because then people just quit and they don't care anymore.
That's right. Okay, Danny, so let's back to train a little bit. Let's go back to some of the early years for you. Tell us, how did you get into the business of broadcasting? How did that start for you?
Well, I've basically been a paid broadcaster since I was 5 years old.
Really? 5 years old?
My dad was a TV news anchorman.
Okay.
And this is in Boston, and he had many, many jobs, man. He usually either had a good job or he had no job.
Right.
So our life was sort of a roller coaster of having really nice things and then eating government issue food, in between. But for much of my childhood, he would be working in radio and television stations when you could have both in the same building.
Sure.
And I used to go to work with him on the weekends. He'd work on the weekends for some of those jobs. And in one of the times of my formative life from about 5 to 12 or so, he worked in one of those settings. And I went to work with him on the weekends all the time.
So was he a sports?
He was a newsman.
Straight news guy. Okay.
Yeah, he was a newsman.
Okay.
Although he did sports for 1 year. He agreed to do it, and it basically ended up costing him his job at that particular station.
Okay.
Because he went to do the sports. He was doing the 6 and 11 o'clock news. They asked him to do the sports, and he said, "Yeah, he was a big sports fan. He loved it." But then they acquired the rights to the then Boston Patriots.
Okay.
He didn't do play-by-play. They hired a play-by-play announcer who also did that, so he lost his job because of that.
Gotcha.
But during another span of time, he was working at a radio and television station, and so I would go in there on the weekends. There's less, business people there. It's a very sort of a shell amount of people there, so they don't mind having kids running around.
Right.
And I would do commercials and. If they needed an extra kid for Romper Room or Bozo the Clown, which they used to tape all of those shows on the weekends.
Yeah.
They do all 5 of them, or they do 10 at a time. And they had a Western show done by a man called Rex Trailer, and that was called Boomtown.
Okay.
And they needed extra kids for that a lot. And so they just literally ducked their head into the newsroom and go, "It's Clinkscale's kid here." And so I would do that.
Yeah.
And actually, my first paycheck as a broadcaster was when I was 5 years old. I did a soda in the lexicon of New England, soft drink commercial for a regional brand called Jolly Treat. and I did it with my little brother. So that was the first time I
Interesting.
got paid $100 when I was 5 years old in the early 60s. So, and I once also spent a few minutes on the radio with George Carlin.
Wow.
He was a disc jockey
Yeah.
just before he became famous.
Interesting.
So I have that in my little resume as well. But I was a good athlete, but in the end, not great. And I always basically in my head thought I'm either going to be a professional athlete or I'm going to talk about it. And I think part of the motivation is that you don't, when your dad does something, you don't feel it's very special. You know, if he can do it,
Yeah.
certainly anybody can.
Yeah.
He's the guy you're mad at a lot and whatever. And so I didn't think it was anything special or challenging to be a broadcaster. And so that was what I decided to do when I realized I wasn't going to be a professional athlete. So I was always statistically oriented, and I loved numbers, and so all that tied into it too. And so that's how my course was charted.
Okay, interesting. So what was the, if you were to say one thing that you love most about broadcasting, what is it that drew you to it?
Well, there's little question that the thing I enjoy the most about broadcasting is doing play-by-play. That was my career goal.
Interesting. Okay.
I always got to do play-by-play throughout my career, but never on a basis where that was the way I made my entire living.
Yeah.
I did indeed have the aspirations to be Bob Costas or somebody like that, or Al Michaels. And I just loved it, and it is the thing that I've enjoyed the most in broadcasting. There's little question about that. When you call a game on the radio,
Yeah.
especially, I mean, I've done some television, which is not nearly as much of a broadcaster's, a play-by-play man's craft. It's more of a color man's craft. But when you're the play-by-play man on the radio, and you were basically the eyes and ears of the fan, once the game starts, it's your show.
Yeah.
And I would make it akin to a jazz musician,
Interesting.
because it's
Yeah.
complete improvisation. You're in complete control. And I think you also get that feeling at times. I know you get that feeling, which is what athletes talk about, being in the zone, where you'll be calling a basketball game, and it's like 15 minutes into the first half, and you throw to a break, and you're just like, I got it tonight. I mean, this is going good. And thankfully, that seemed to happen to me a lot. Now, I was weaned early in my broadcast career doing hockey. And so if you do hockey, you can do anything. Hockey's a very difficult sport to do. And once you master that, the other sports are quite easy.
So you would say more of the performer, entertainer, artistic side, that was the draw. That was the...
Yeah, I like
and it's
all
just-
aspects of it.
Right.
I do like all aspects of broadcasting. I like reporting, interviewing athletes. It's just, that's part of the job. You get some great moments that usually are moments that occur because the athlete is upset with you. Those are usually the best things. My most famous one is probably when Mike Moustakis famously kept saying the same thing over and over again because he didn't want to do an interview. And so I kind of kept badgering him, and that became a little bit famous. But that aspect of it, I like. I like reporting. I like field reporting. I really like everything, but there's nothing to me like doing a play-by-play game of any sport, for that matter. But hockey's very challenging and taxing. Basketball is probably the one I enjoy the most. I like baseball the most as a fan, but that's a completely different type of broadcasting. That's storytelling more, and it's leisurely, but I like doing that as well. So I do like that. I do like all the aspects of broadcasting. I like interviewing people very much, just normal, everyday people, and most athletes too. Retired athletes are usually actually a better interview because they don't have that distance anymore.
Right.
They don't feel like you're going to step on their toes. They're comfortable in their own skin more. So all of it's great. I mean, when I was laid off and downsized. It's really downsized because I still do work for the company. And I was talking to the guys. It was disappointing, but what I said was, I've never really worked a day in my life. My avocation has been my vocation in my life.
Right.
And, that's a very rewarding thing, which makes up for the long hours and the low pay.
So many times I've interviewed...
Relatively low pay.
I've interviewed a number of people, and we always seem to come back to that passion. We come back to that avocation where find what you love. You don't have to go to work, and I love hearing that
Right.
that's been your journey. So
Yeah,
we don't have to cover. We don't have to
absolutely.
cover that ground. That's already taken care of. So also, okay. So Danny, so the business of broadcasting has had ups and downs, right? You said you've
Right.
had 5 separate jobs in the last. number
I
of
just
years.
counted off the top of my head. I think
Okay.
that's about right.
Okay, so it was somewhere between dad and somewhere between
Right.
5, right?
Right.
And then the journey you have worked for a radio station or television, right? Is it
Right.
a media company of some sort, and
Yeah.
you were an employee of that? So now you're in a new adventure now.
Right.
Right. So circumstances have kind of moved you into the entrepreneurial sphere.
Right.
And that's a lot of people who be watching this interview will be inspired, and we'll see what nuggets. So now you're kind of on the beginning stages of that. So talk about that a little bit, or maybe you've been leading up to that. You've maybe had some stuff on the side, or maybe just share a little about the entrepreneurial side of coming out of corporate and
Well,
launching into
entrepreneurship is completely new to me, really.
this. Okay.
Most young broadcasters, when they are starting out, will work at a very small radio station in a small town, and they will, in addition to their broadcasting, have to go out and sell. I never had to do that.
Yes.
My first professional radio job was at a radio station in Milford, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And there was no way I could have been able to sell because I did a disc jockey shift from 9 to 1. I did the afternoon news all afternoon. I did a sports talk show in the evening, and I did all the games. So there were.
What was the disc jockey job? What was it?
It was just
what was it? Rock and roll station.
modern pop,
All right.
top 40 basically.
Okay.
But it was one of the basic small town full service radio stations.
Okay. Okay.
So there were days literally where I was on the air from 9 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. I mean, if you didn't like me, you didn't listen to WMRC in Milford, period. So anyway, so there was no room for sales there. And then the next job I went to was at a larger radio station in upstate New York. And so I never sold. I did my broadcasting and I was compensated for it. You'd help out the salespeople and go out on sales calls and things like that, but you didn't have to close a deal. You basically would, I could espouse what a good idea it was to advertise in radio because I knew that the people got return on their product. I saw that aspect of it. And you would promote products if you agreed to, and I was always kind of picky about that. But as far as going out and having a product like my website and selling it, I've never done that.
Okay.
And that is something I am learning with the
Okay.
help of many people like at this particular enterprise and others. It's probably not a natural thing for me, and it's probably not natural as well from the standpoint of the fact that your product is me.
Right.
I basically am saying, come to my website, which is growing and is going, and now we have analytics, and I'll be able to pitch that. But prior to its launch, basically I was selling the fact that I've had a following for years. I produce good content.
Yes.
This will benefit you, all of which I believe is true. But still, it's different than selling a copier or selling landscaping, or whatever. So it is a new thing. It is a learned thing, and I have to
Sure.
keep my ears open, and I think I'm getting better at it. I don't think it will ever be a completely natural thing for me, but people always say to you when you're trying to get information from them about how to be a better marketer and salesperson that, well, you're always really selling yourself anyway. And that, to some degree, is true. It sounds kind of trite, but it is true. And so that's something that I'm really starting to embrace
That's
and enjoy
great.
because I do feel like the product is a worthy one.
Absolutely, and I love the humility that you have, and there's so many people, even when they build large organizations or brands, they're still the eternal student. They're still learning. Because even when you hit those certain levels, there's still more challenges. You can never have too much wisdom and counsel in your life and experiences that you have to work through. And I just applaud you because that's the beginning of the journey. You have a skill, you have a passion, you have a craft that you've mastered. You're a master of it.
Right.
And now you're moving from just kind of like this. When I come here, the stage is set. I come and do my thing and I go home, right? That's
Right.
pretty much how it was. You just do your
Right.
thing and go
Exactly.
home.
Exactly.
Now you're bringing it home with you. You're waking up with it every single day, breathing it, living it. So I just honor you, first of all, Danny, for that just for the adversity. I'm going to switch into another topic. You're a man that understands adversity. So if you can do this because of what we're about to talk about, right? And let's go there a little bit.
Well, I had cancer surgery and radiation treatment in 2015. And basically, the idea behind the book traces a year in my life.
Right.
From the World Series in 2014 to the World Series in 2015. That's the setting of the book.
Nice.
I discovered that I had cancer during the World Series of 2014.
Really?
Yes, I was just idly, as it says in the book. You know, when you see all these people, I really, it resonates with me now when I see people who appear on talk shows and they're talking about their book. They always say, as is told in the book, because their agent tells them to say that all the time. But you do feel like saying that all the time. Anyway, I just literally sat down in the parking spot after I came back from Game 5 of the World Series and just scratched my face just like that. You know, like you do like 100 times a day maybe.
Sure.
Or you feel a little scratch on your nose or whatever. And I just felt this lump there. And because I had very minor skin cancer surgery a year before, I was a little more attuned to it. I'm a very healthy person my entire life, very fortunate in that regard. And if I did sort of feel something ordinarily in the past, I would just ignore it and say, well, I'm just going to battle through. I literally never missed a day of work in my entire broadcasting career. And I didn't miss any during this process either, by the way. So I did get it checked out immediately, and it turned out that it was a somewhat fluky form of cancer that was a little bit of cancer had remained from the previous treatment. They didn't get it all. At least this is the close to speculation truth. Nothing's 100% sure of the doctors. One small bit got stuck in my salivary gland, main salivary gland. You have little tiny salivary glands all over your face, but you only have one main one.
Right.
And so they had to remove that, and your salivary gland also extracts many, many lymph nodes, so they had to take a bunch of those out and check them and make sure they were clean as well. Then I did 30 rounds of radiation. And about halfway through the radiation treatments, I just got an idea in my head that I wanted to take a trip. And and the idea somehow came to be that I would just take off one day and I wouldn't tell anybody where I was going. And I wouldn't really know where I was going. I knew the general direction I wanted to go. I wanted to go to the Black Hills. I've always enjoyed scenic photographs of the mountains and things like that, and I've never seen it that much. I've been to almost every state in the Union, but I haven't spent much time in the mountains. So that was my idea, and it was more to have a goal. I knew that in late May I was going to do a broadcast at Firekeeper Golf Course north of Topeka. And we call it's a stay and play package, and so you advertise that. I would stay at the casino hotel the night before. I'd play golf that day, and then I would talk about it on the afternoon talk show. And so that was the idea behind it. And so I said, well, you know what? By that date, I should be better, quote unquote, and my taste should have returned, which it didn't completely. I lost that. And so that would be a good jumping off point. And so that's what I did. And a big hook of the book, I guess, well, I know because usually it gets gasps from most of the people in the audience, especially the women. I didn't tell my wife I was going either. And the idea really makes the story a love story, because at the outset of the book, I did have in the book the email that I left my wife when I did leave. And I said that I trust you and I trust that you understand what I'm doing. And she did, and actually subsequently 2 years later we took the same trip basically, and she got to make all the decisions. But I can highly recommend this particular thing to anybody in life, if they enjoy their own company, which I do.
Yeah, sure.
So because I was by myself all the time.
Yeah.
But I only had one destination, just so I'd planted a flag. And that was the first night, Broken Bow, Nebraska. And then from that point, each morning I got up and rode my bike around whatever little town I was in. And then I came back and sat down at my computer and just picked a spot about 5 hours away, and that's where I was going to go that day. But until that morning, I didn't know what I was going to do that day.
So
and I only had a couple
So what happened? What did you discover? What did you find out?
I discovered that I had a great time, I'll say that, and that I
Okay.
really do enjoy my own company. But I also am an observer of human nature, and I had in my mind the thought that I might write a book. And I only had a couple of ground rules. I didn't drive on any interstates, and I only stayed in towns that were big enough where there might be something to do in the evening, but not very big at all. So anywhere from 5 to, I think the biggest place I stayed was Hastings, Nebraska, and that has about 20,000 people in it. And every stop along the way, there were interesting things to see and people to see. I played golf a couple of times, and very freeing. I drove for, however many hundreds of miles some days, and a lot of times I never even played the radio. I mean, I literally would just sit and think and flash back to points in my life, and my book does include flashbacks to different periods of my life. So it's basically it's a road trip book, it's a baseball book, it's a, semi-auto.
It's a Danny Clinkscale
Yeah,
book.
there's a lot of Danny Clinkscale there. Anyway, it was, my wife and I did it together again, and we did the same thing, except this time she was the one sitting at the computer in the morning, and actually I kind of went to the Black Hills and then went back this way through North Dakota. The next trip we went through Wyoming, and it was beautiful. It's beautiful country and really just cool and a great topic for a book. And I can't say it was a cathartic experience.
Right.
But
the bright light wasn't shining down in that moment.
It was getting there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I loved it. I mean, that was the thing that made it great, is that you spent this time by yourself, you get to think. I got to listen to my old-time radio shows or music, but like I said, some days I'd drive 4 hours and not even turn the radio on.
Yeah.
But there's a very interesting story at least to me, as to how it confirmed in my head. When I was taking the trip, I had in my mind that I might write a book, but I didn't write anything on the trip. I did make notes each night just so I would jog my memory,
Yeah.
but I have a good memory anyway, so it doesn't really, really didn't even matter. But the day that I was declared cancer-free was the same day that Eric Berry of the Kansas City Chiefs was declared cancer-free. Wow. So I hadn't talked publicly about my cancer at all, and I didn't intend to. There had been some veiled references to how I'd been a good trooper or whatever, but I didn't really talk about it, and I didn't care to talk about it, and I still don't like to think of that there was anything heroic whatsoever about what I did. People would come up and congratulate me on beating cancer, and I'm like, they're all well-meaning, and in fact, I couldn't thank them enough for the outpouring. But I didn't try any harder than, Flip Saunders, the head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, died of cancer, a similar kind of cancer, like at the same time as me. He didn't try any less hard than me to beat cancer. He just didn't have the good fortune to beat it. But anyway, I did. And so that same day Eric Berry was cleared. So I went into the office, I used some vulgar language, and walked into Kevin Keatsman, my co-host on Between the Lines. Basically it's his show, but I'm a co-host. And I said, Eric Berry isn't the only blanker who's happy today. And he said, this is too good. You have to talk about it today. I mean, it's too fitting. We're going to talk about Eric Berry. And so I did. And I kind of broke down during the telling of the story when I talked about my wife. And there was such an outpouring from people, many of whom said they had to stop their cars and pull over to the side of the road because they were crying and everything about the story. And I got hundreds of emails, literally, I know over 500. And most people have been touched in some way by cancer. They've either lost a loved one or they've had it themselves or whatever. So that outpouring convinced me that I had to write the book. And that was the real genesis for me doing it. Now, the actual writing of it was not that difficult because the Royals made the World Series in 2015, and I covered each round of the playoffs, which meant a lot of travel, a lot of time in airports, a lot of layover time, stuff like that. So I wrote 90% of the book in like a month. Because you just have a lot of time and the stuff pours out, and it's a personal journey, a personal story. So you're not making up characters and things like that. So that was all easy. But then it took almost another full calendar year to make sure it was right, and adding the touches that needed to be done. So I very much enjoyed it. I probably will write another book. I'm too busy right now to write another book, but I loved it. And in the end. I said this at all the book signings I did eventually, and it's true. The fact that I survived it and I'm healthy now and cancer was good to me.
Yeah.
It was a good thing.
It's interesting you said that back when we were talking
Yeah,
earlier.
because I never would have taken that trip. I never would have got the reinforcement of the feeling of love of my wife. I never would have met all the nice people who came to these book signings. Many had emotional stories. I did book signings in my hometown. I did book signings at the Baseball Hall of Fame. I mean, these are unbelievable opportunities to get, and that's all because of cancer.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
thankfully, since I didn't die of it, it was ended up being a good thing.
Well, I'll tell you, Danny, it is a big deal that you overcame it.
Well, thank you.
And
Yeah, I
a
agree.
lot of people
I agree. It's a big thing.
will feel, they have a similar position, the humility that's exuded, but it is a big deal.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no, you're welcome.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here.
No, that's right, and
You
that's
wouldn't
the
have-
thing.
You wouldn't have an
It's
interview
kind of,
today.
yeah, right. How does it feel, by the way, the interview being interviewed?
It's fine. I've never really understood why athletes or anybody really has any issue ever with being interviewed. I mean, who doesn't like to talk about themselves?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
I mean,
about.
everybody does.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So it's I don't get it, to be honest. When somebody doesn't like to do it, I'm like, why? What's the problem here? So anyway.
A man after my own heart. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. What are you doing now? Where are you headed? You've written the book. You're launching into, because your website is basically, the podcasting is something that you are extremely passionate about.
Right.
Looking to drive out some content.
Right.
You also do movie reviews.
Mm-hmm.
You also do, well, tell us.
Wow.
Why don't you tell the audience, what is it that you do now? Where is
Hello,
your passion
audience.
going?
The idea behind the website, which was very well designed, by the way, from a look standpoint. I had a vision of it being more stylized by far than most sports websites. It's not just a sports website, but for a sports fan, it is a great spot to go. And if you're a fan, if you've listened to me through the years and you respect my opinions, or you disagree with my opinions, whatever, that's what sports is all about. Most 65 to 75% of it is sports content.
Okay.
And there is a page, there are 5 different pages on the website. There is a page that's devoted to our local teams, the 9 teams, KU, K-State, Missouri, basketball, football,
Okay.
sporting, Chiefs, Royals. And you can just go there, click on their page, and there's constantly refreshing content. 10 stories rotate at all times. They're refreshed once every hour for each team. So you can literally, I guess the best way to describe it is the idea behind the website is that you can get up in the morning, have your morning cup of coffee, catch up on all your sports
Hang out with
teams,
Danny.
and hang out with Danny. And
Okay.
if Danny had interviewed somebody interesting or wrote a movie review or had some thoughts in a musical essay, many of which have been among the more popular blogs I've written, then you can do that too. So that's the whole idea behind it. And from a content standpoint, that is not any issue whatsoever. I mean, I'm a content whore. There's no question about that. I can produce content like
nobody's business.
nobody's business,
Yeah.
but I can't just produce content
Right.
because I am the chief marketer
Right.
and bottle washer for the website. So there's a lot of
So
time.
you're building a media company, essentially.
Right, yes.
Right?
You are building your own media company. And so people can go there for blogs, podcasts, movie reviews, film essays. There's a presenter page if you would like me to be a presenter, if you're impressed with my wonderful presentation skills right here. It's just a way to have your fingers in various pies and create a business.
So you're looking to grow your audience. You
Right.
subscribers, feedback,
Advertisers.
the metrics go up, and then sponsors, right? So
Right.
sponsors, you have a couple sponsors
Yeah,
right
we
now.
have our sponsors already, and they were really. I'll never be able to thank the initial sponsors enough, in helping to get this thing off the ground, because, when they all signed up, there wasn't even a website yet.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a shell of a website. I could show them the website, but it wasn't even live. So there was no analytics, which have been good so far, and so people, there's a lot of podcasts, a lot of websites out there. You have to find people who you feel are a good connection for you, and they for you, you for them. And I think people are going to find it a great place to sell their product. And a big part of the reason I think so is not just the amount of subscribers and listeners and viewers, which is good and is going to get better. it's also the fact that it's a place where I think they will be proud to have their product sold.
Absolutely.
You know, it looks good, the content is of a high quality, and so I think that they'll be happy, you know, to say that they're, you know, even just the show-off part of saying, go see Danny Clinkscale's website and look at my commercial, or listen to my commercial on there, or look at my banner advertisement. It'll be a great home for them, I think. So I'm confident about that. I try to exude that confidence in a sales manner, which has never been something I've done, but I'm growing to like it, and I like the relationships that develop, even when somebody ends up saying no.
Yeah. Well, one thing, and what's the name of the one? It's DannyClinkscale.
DannyClinkscale.com. And the podcast is called Reasonably Irreverent.
Reasonably Irreverent. And one thing, as I was looking at your website, as I'm getting to know you more today, Danny, some of the content of your journey from 2014 on, some personal development stuff for people, might be an interesting hook, might be an interesting niche of that audience bringing in, because I just hearing it's compelling.
Well,
I
think that, you know, there's actually, in reference to the book, for instance, I wrote, and this will give you an example of what the kind of content is going to be in the website, and the differences that it has maybe from other websites of its kind, is I wrote a blog 2 weeks ago about snow, and because I have grown to despise snow, and I liked it when I was a kid.
You're not alone.
I liked it when I was a kid, and you know, we built tunnels and forts and all that stuff. And anyway, it's when it snowed that day around Thanksgiving, we had that storm. It just inspired me to write that, and I included in it a story of a near-death experience that is chronicled in the book.
Okay.
I was driving back from a hockey game in upstate New York, and I should have been killed.
Wow.
I mean, absolutely, positively, a miracle I was not killed. Briefly, anybody knows if you drive upstate New York, the last winter I lived there, it snowed 200 inches. I shoveled snow 31 consecutive days. But anyway, I was driving back from West Point, actually, from a hockey game at West Point, and we're going about 45, and everybody who drives in upstate New York goes, you can keep going in the snow if you go about that speed, and nobody hits their brakes. Well, one slob panicked and hit their brakes, and so then all of us are pinwheeling around the New York State Thruway, and my car ended up stalling, pointed backwards.
Wow.
And two semi-tractor trailers were in the 2 lanes of the road, no more than 200 yards up.
Wow.
Going 45, 50 miles an hour. So I didn't have time to do anything, so I literally just threw myself down on the seat, covered my head in my hands, and just waited. Actually, the title of the chapter is called Waiting for Impact. And I just waited to get hit by the trucks. There was no way they could, you know, because all along the road, almost the entire way, because of the topography, there's guardrails. And there's no room for anybody but by some miracle, that stretch of road had no guardrails. So the trucks literally went like this, and they were honking their horn, and they went just like that, right around me. And they were so close that they blew me about 150 feet down the highway. But I was sure I was going to get killed.
That's amazing.
So anyway,
That's amazing.
that story's in the book.
Little teaser
that's
for the
included,
book.
That's included in that.
That's bonus coverage right there.
That's another, yes. So there you go. So that's called cannibalizing material, I believe.
No, that's good. That's good.
So it's about half the blog was easy peasy because I just copied and pasted it.
Well, Danny, how was this today? How was being interviewed today?
I loved it. Who doesn't love talking about themselves?
That's right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause to Danny Clinkscale. I appreciate you coming out today and sharing some of your heart with us.
Thank
and we
you.
will be right back. Thank you so much.